This video is made possible by my patrons on Patreon. Hello everyone, my name is Ziamaro and welcome to Battlerite Sage. Just quickly before I start, it's Wednesday, which means I'll be streaming around the time this goes out over at twitch.tv/BattleriteSage, so come say hi after the video. So today I'm going to be going through something that's been highly requested on the channel for a while now, and that is a map guide. With the introduction of map votes, you can now make it less likely that you'll play certain maps. But the thing is, which maps are favourable to your champion and which ones are not? It's pretty common for people to ban both ORMAN Temple maps and SKYRING Day. But why is that? And as a matter of fact, those maps are actually beneficial to some champions. So the purpose of this guide is to help inform that decision and to help you get the most out of each map. So first off, there are 5 maps, each with a day and night variant, and it's really important to note that the day and night versions of each map, while they look similar, they are definitely not the same. The main difference is usually the orientation of walls, and you'd be surprised how important it is to take that into consideration. Just to quickly illustrate, take a look at the difference between SKYRING Night and SKYRING Day. Not only are SKYRING Day's inner walls facing into the arena, there are also 4 extra walls sticking out of the outer edge of the map. There are a ton of reasons why this makes a big difference, but we'll come back to SKYRING in a minute. The other thing to take note of is that all of the maps are horizontally symmetrical. What that means is you can flip the camera 180 degrees and it will look the same. Have you ever noticed that you always spawn on the left-hand side of the map? That's not a coincidence. Each team sees the map upside down from each other. So looking left to right, both teams see pretty much the same thing. However, one thing to consider is the angle of the game's camera. It's not a perfectly top-down view. The camera is tilted upwards slightly, and that means you have slightly more vision looking up the map than you do looking down. And because of the mirrored camera angle, your up is also the enemy's up. And because you can see slightly further firing up the map, if you're a champion with long-range projectiles, it can be beneficial for you to be on the lower side of the map shooting upwards. Honestly though, it's something worth noting, but don't worry too much. It's usually best to position yourself based on the map's geometry, rather than worrying about standing on the upper or lower side of the map. So with that out of the way, let's start with our first map, Mount ARAZ Day. Personally, I think both of the ARAZ maps are pretty good for any champion. Both ARAZ maps have the skulls at the top and bottom, and they're pretty much just fancy looking walls. One feature of ARAZ Day is the fact that there are 4 other walls. 2 inward facing ones close to the skull, and 2 walls facing out of the arena in the top left and bottom right. This creates kind of a central corridor leading from the spawn to mid, but it also creates 3 potential entrances to mid on each side. Compared to ARAZ Night, the entrances are a little bit more choky, but they're not too bad. Champions who can jump over walls like Croak can make pretty good use of the wall positionings to either catch people off guard or to escape. So let's look at the differences with Mount ARAZ Night. Just like with ARAZ Day, the Night version has the skulls at the top and the bottom. But the main difference with ARAZ Night is the fact that there are only 2 other walls, and they're both facing inwards and right in the middle. This means that there are only 2 entrances to mid on each side, but the entrances are much bigger than on ARAZ Day. This gives you much more room to play with in the choke, and it also means less places to get flanked from. One issue in solo queue can be some people going the top way and others going the bottom. It's not always a problem, but at least from a support perspective, doing that can sometimes lead to some line of sight issues. So if you do go top and bottom, try and move into mid so that removes any line of sight issues you might have. The map is both horizontally and vertically symmetrical, so there's no real advantage to going top or bottom. So next, let's move on to the infamous ORMAN Temple Day. If you're someone who dislikes the ORMAN maps, ORMAN Day is probably the worst culprit. Not only is the mid area slightly smaller than the night version, but there are also 8 walls plus the square things on the left and right. If you're a big brain Rook main, then you'll love this map. You can press R on someone and you can almost guarantee they'll hit one of the many walls. The extra walls also make the entrance to mid significantly more choky compared to ORMAN Night. So if you're a champion who struggles to deal with aggressive melee champions, you really don't want to play this map. It's pretty rare for this map to be played competitively, but when it is, you can almost guarantee both sides will have a Rook or a Freya. Jamila can also make really great use of the walls. If you get caught in the upper or lower area with no escapes against an aggressive melee champion, you're kinda boned. So when you're playing a support or ranged DPS, it can be very helpful to have a space that can go through walls, like Older or Ashka. So let's look at the differences with ORMAN Temple Night. The Knight variant actually has a slightly larger mid area because of the square bits being further back into the spawn. It's also missing 4 walls that ORMAN Day has in the upper and lower areas, so the entrance to mid is not quite as tight. The map is still a dream for certain melee champions, but not quite as much as ORMAN Day. Same thing as with ORMAN Day though. As a range champion, it can be beneficial to have a space that can go through walls, just in case you get stuck. Both the Day and the Night version have very small entrances to mid, but ORMAN Night is not quite so bad. Needless to say though, there's a reason these maps aren't popular. They just benefit some comps too heavily, so it can restrict which champions you pick. Or at the very least, it requires impeccable positioning at all times. Let's move on to the other unpopular map. SKYRING Day. Just like the ORMAN map, SKYRING Day has an abundance of inward-facing walls. The entrances, while slightly wider than the ORMAN maps, are still pretty tight, so it's very easy to get zoned out of mid if you're not playing the right comp. It also has extra walls on the outer edges of the map. This creates more areas to herd people into and demolish them, so if you're the sort of sadist that likes to do that, you might really like SKYRING Day. But same thing as with the ORMAN maps, if you play a champion that can get huge value using walls, the map will be good for you. But again, it does restrict the choices more than other maps. SKYRING Night is a totally different story though. The removal of the walls on the outer edges of the arena and the fact that the inner walls don't face into the arena make it a lot less choky. And for that reason, it's a lot easier for ranged champions to position and not get choked into a small space. One thing to note about both SKYRING maps is the fact that they're both fully symmetrical, so there's no advantage to top, bottom, left or right. They also have a very tight choke leading to the spawn area. You really don't want to go back there if you can avoid it. Even chasing someone who's low into there can be super risky, because if the tables turn, well, I'm not going to lie to you, you're probably dead. Next, let's move on to a map that, personally, I think is the most balanced map in the game. BLACKSTONE Day. Now, you can feel free to disagree, but I think this map can work for almost any comp. Pokey, more defensive comps can try and stay in the middle area, while aggressive comps can try and push the enemy into the upper and lower areas where it's a little less open. The map isn't fully symmetrical though, so if you get caught in the top right or bottom left, there is a wall there that blocks the spawn. It's not too bad, but the other 2 corners don't have that, so you have more movement options there. Like I said, I really like this map. Some of my most exciting games have been on this map, and unless the teams are particularly uneven, it feels like any comp has a fighting chance. Next, let's take a look at the Night version. BLACKSTONE Night has a few key differences to the Day version. First of all, the positioning of these walls can create some line of sight issues for supports if people split between the top and bottom. Like I said with ARAZ Night, this isn't always a problem, but it's something to be aware of. If you're playing a very self-sufficient champion and you think you can make use of the split, then go ahead. But if you want heals, try not to put a wall between yourself and your support. Another huge consideration on this map is the absolutely horrendous rooms in the top right and bottom left. Just like with BLACKSTONE Day, there's a wall blocking you from getting to spawn. But there's also a wall stopping you going towards the opposite spawn. So if you're under pressure and you need to fall back, do not, I repeat, do not go in there. It's an absolute death trap. Ideally, you always want to take mid and never get zoned out, but it does happen of course. So an interesting strategy you could use if you have a tendency to get stuck there is to go over the top of the map. Because there's no wall blocking spawn there, you're way less likely to get stuck. If you play a champion that has no way to move through walls like Lucy or Jamong, you especially don't want to get stuck in the death room. If you can at least space through walls, getting stuck is less of an issue, but it's still not advisable. If you can avoid getting stuck in there though, it's not a bad map. So let's move on to our final set of maps with Dragon Garden Day. These maps are like the polar opposite of ORMAN Temple. The middle area is huge, so you have tons of space to poke the enemy team. If you manage to stay in the middle, it makes it very hard for champions who rely on walls. So actually, if you're someone who likes to abuse immobile champions and throw them into tiny chokes, you may actually want to consider downvoting both of the Dragon Garden maps. As someone who almost exclusively plays ranged champions though, these maps are great. One thing to take note of is how tight the upper and lower areas are. If you're someone who can take advantage of that, you might want to pressure people into there. Those areas also have some great pinball opportunities for Destiny. And finally, let's take a look at Dragon Garden Night. Dragon Night has a slightly narrower mid area, but it also forms an uninterrupted corridor. As someone who plays a lot of Paloma, this map is amazing. Keeping that holy triangle formation that Paloma just loves to create is so easy on this map. As long as your allies mostly stay in the middle, the map is an absolute dream if you're a Paloma player. But that's not the case for all champions. If you're against a Paloma or similarly defensive support, you probably want to get them pushed into the outer areas. Just like with Dragon Day, there are some really great pinball opportunities on the top and bottom. The only difference is there are more places to hide back there. The area closer to the spawn is also pretty choky, so if you're playing an aggressive comp, you'll want to push the enemy back there if you can. If you're playing a more pokey comp though, you'll definitely want to avoid going back there. So, that just about does it for the maps. If you're someone who didn't know what the differences were between each of them, I hope this helped. And if you're someone who's already familiar with the maps, let people know of any other tactics you like to make use of down in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please feel free to subscribe for more Battlerite guides, news, and discussion. If you'd like to help support the channel and get some unique rewards, then head over to patreon.com/battleritesage. And don't forget to check out twitch.tv/battleritesage. Until next time, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.